The lesson for today is the resurrection of Jesus, John chapter 20, verses 1 to 18. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Peter then came out with the other disciple, and they went toward the tomb. They both ran, but the disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying, and the napkin, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not know the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept she stooped to look in the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to him, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Saying this, she turned round and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and said to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. Well, Mary Magdalene would have gone to the tomb before dawn, as to say before 6 o'clock, according to the Jewish way of figuring the hours of the day. And it would have been dark. She would not have been able to see very much at all. It would have been generally assumed that the tomb in which Jesus lay was only temporary. Remember, he had to be taken from the cross before the Passover began and the Sabbath began, and it would only have been a temporary tomb. And it's hardly likely that the Jews or the Romans would have told the disciples where they had moved Jesus. They would have wanted to avoid any kind of tumult around the tomb. Certainly it would not have been reasonable to suppose that neither the Sanhedrin nor the Romans wanted a tomb that could be venerated by those who loved Jesus. They would have wanted his body disposed of, thrown to the wild dogs and birds. Well, Mary, called Magdalene, is from the town of Magdala on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. And we have an intriguing problem. Who takes away the stone over the grave? Is it an angel? Is it Jesus himself pushing it up from within the cave? We don't know. If we assume that the beloved disciple is John, then it may be that Peter and John were staying together after the crucifixion. The first person plural, we, perhaps suggests that other women were with Mary Magdalene in the visit to the tomb, but that John the Evangelist focused intently on Mary Magdalene for artistic purposes. Clearly, Peter and John have no idea that the body of Jesus has been moved, so they're as curious as to its whereabouts as Mary herself. They run to the tomb, and they have to stoop to look in. The tomb would have had a very low entrance. Peter would have had to have stooped down on his knees in order to peer into the tomb. Then Peter comes following him and goes to the tomb, and he sees the linen cloths lying. Now Peter is always a bit rash or impetuous. Of course he would go into the tomb first. If we look at the Greek, it's clear. Peter beholds the linen cloths. It's a stronger claim than a mere perception. He's taken aback by these. He's in awe of what he sees. And then he sees the napkin which had been on Jesus' head. Lazarus emerged from the tomb wearing the grave linens. Jesus, however, is raised from the dead in quite another manner than Lazarus. It's useful to think that the body of Jesus had been prepared with unguents, a huge amount of them, which would have stuck to the grave clothes. So he would have been glued into his linens in the grave. He couldn't have just disentangled himself from them. So it's all the more surprising that the grave clothes are in good order and haven't been torn off the body. The napkin has been carefully rolled up, a bit like a turban, making it clear that great care has been taken to leave a sign. No Roman soldier would have done such a thing, nor would any grave robber. Or quite possibly, the transformation of Jesus, which occurs at the resurrection, means that he simply slips out of his grave clothes without disturbing them. So there is a complete change of his substance that occurs, and the grave clothes which were glued to his physical body just fall away. An extraordinary moment. Then the other disciple who reaches the tomb first goes in, and he saw and believed. To see the absence of Jesus in the tomb is to believe that he was raised from the dead. Clearly, any soldiers removing the body of Jesus would not have unwrapped the body before moving it to another grave or disposing of it in another fashion. The beloved disciple is the first person to hold the Easter faith, and he does so as soon as it's possible to do so. He stares at what he sees in the tomb. But what does John believe at this moment? That Jesus has returned to the Father, or that Jesus has been resurrected in the flesh? Presumably the former. For John the Evangelist says that at the moment they didn't know the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Mary is weeping outside the tomb, and she looks into the tomb. She's come back to the gravesite with Peter and John, and of course, as we know, it was usual for women to weep, sometimes loudly, by the tombs of their dead. We think of the women weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. And she sees two angels in white, one at the head and one at the feet of where Jesus was lying. The two angels are arranged like the cherubs on the top of the Ark of the Covenant. Earlier, Magdalene saw the empty tomb, and the verb indicates visual perception. Now she sees the angels, and the verb indicates that she beholds them mentally. Much of what happens in the resurrection, I think, is not something that could be objectively filmed. The manifestation of Jesus to those who love him occurs in the modality of love. It's a real event, but it is one which couldn't be photographed. So it's not one which occurs through normal neutral perception. It's one which occurs through the love of God. These angels turn to her and say, "Woman, why are you weeping?" The angels refer to Mary as Jesus does to his mother, as woman, and it's neither cool nor distant. Mary Magdalene has wept before the disciples, and now the angels, and she will also weep before Jesus. So the first witness of the risen Christ is actually a woman, not one of the male disciples, even though the beloved disciple is the first to believe that Jesus has risen from the dead. We now see the resurrected Jesus. He doesn't look exactly like the pre-Easter Jesus. Mary Magdalene has been looking for a dead body. Now she's encountered by a living man. And at first Mary Magdalene takes Jesus to be a gardener, one of the few people who would have been up so early in the day. We're reminded of the Garden of Eden, where Adam was charged to be a gardener. Now Jesus is the new Adam, as Paul will argue. Ironically, it is Jesus who is responsible for moving the body of Jesus. Jesus knows that Mary doesn't quite make him out. It is very dark. His face would be covered with shadows. She would be overwrought. And he says to her one word, Mary, and re-establishes the relationship between them. She turns and says to him in Hebrew, Rabboni. It says in the translation it means teacher, which is true enough, but Rabboni really means my master. It's a heightened, more intimate form of the word rabbi, which is teacher. And she goes to hold him, to hug him. And he says, don't do that, I have yet to go to the Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. And this is another reconfiguration of family and home. Mary Magdalene is directed to Jesus' brothers, not his kin, but his disciples. And now she has another father and another brother, Jesus, as do all the disciples. They all have a new father. They're all included in the plural you. So Christianity, among many other things, is a radical reworking of the notion of the home world. Remember that on the cross, Jesus says to John, here is your mother, and to Mary, here is your son. Again, he's not entrusting his mother to his natural brothers or cousins, depending on how we take the Greek word adelphoi. Rather, he's reconfiguring the community of the church as a new sort of family. And then Mary Magdalene goes and says to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, Kyrion. And here Kyrion doesn't mean simply an honorific, sir. It does mean the Lord. The narrative then passes from Mary Magdalene not knowing where Jesus is to knowing where he is and who he is.